limited, but there's some contextual information. Let's say you're reading a story about holidays in Bali. Well, we know something about it. Maybe you've got some ads that are holidays or flights or something related to travel. So you might, it's in the travel section, you might target travel ads at them. If someone's actually reading a story about, I don't know, something happening in politics today, but they've been spending a lot of time reading stuff about Bali in the travel section, they might target an ad at them about travel, even though they're not in the travel section. Now, a publisher has to juggle, this is a really difficult optimization problem. What ad am I going to serve to this person? And they have to make that decision quickly as well. Based on all the things we've got, based on all the ad impressions we've got available, so who's booked ads with us, they'll make a decision and serve you an ad. We'll get into some of the business of that in a second. What happens is the publisher's ad server makes an ad serving decision, redirects your browser out to the advertiser's ad server. Your browser connects to the advertiser's ad server. Now this is important too. So you see there's a cookie there as well. Now if I've been to the advertiser's ad server before, well maybe they know something about me too. So let's say I'm on a publisher's ad server and they've decided, hey, Toyota's booked a lot of ads with us at the moment, we'll serve a Toyota ad. It then goes out to Toyota's ad server and Toyota goes, wait a second, this guy just booked a test drive for a Hilux. Instead of serving them the ad that says, hey, Toyota's awesome, we actually know he's further down the funnel, maybe we'll give him the buy by the end of the month and we'll give you 12 months interest-free ad instead. So they're making that knowledge, they're using that knowledge as well. And to do that, they'd have on their book a test drive form a pixel that goes back to their ad server that says, hey, this guy's just booked a Hilux test drive. So already we're pretty complex. The advertiser's ad server makes an ad serving decision, redirects you out to their CDN, that's a content delivery network, just means that stuff gets pushed to your browser faster because it's closer to you. Ads load fast, right? Faster than they would be if they didn't go through this anyway. Your browser connects there, and finally you get a banner ad. Yeah, so an ad finally loads. So what are the reasons and the ways this stuff gets sold? So a publisher will sell potentially direct, and this is certainly how it used to be. It's changing a fair bit. That means you've got a sales team that goes out, shakes lots of hands, buys lots of steak lunches, gets people to sign contracts and says, hey, our ads are awesome, our audiences are great, you've got to buy it. And they'll sell that in a whole bunch of different packages. They might have print publications that they bundle it together with. They might have other assets, and they'll try and tailor a solution to you. The general unit of measurement is CPM, so cost per mille is why it's an M, so cost per thousand. And that's the way it's priced. So $10 per 1,000 impressions, $50 per 1,000 impressions, $100 per 1,000 impressions. And ads do range all the way over those ranges. You can buy ads for less than a cent per 1,000 impressions, but they're shit impressions, probably robots. Or you can spend $100 CPM because they've identified that the person's in market for life insurance, which if you make a sale on that is worth $100,000 or so in profit. So it can kind of range all over that kind of range. Then you can buy different ways of buying. So you might say, I want to sponsor, I'm an airline, I want to sponsor the travel section. So I just want my ad only to appear when people are in the travel section. And a publisher will go, yeah, we can do that. CPM's going to be kind of high because you block buying the whole thing. And that often happens when, a big company goes and does a big marketing splash and they want to make sure that all their senior execs see that ad. So they'll go and block buy the big publishers' things and go, hey, look at our awesome campaign. It's great, it's there. And it's kind of vanity. It's not really effective, but it's effective for that small audience of, I need my execs to see it on the day we launch. Then there's all sorts of other ways of buying spots and dots all over the websites that the publisher runs. So you can run site, which just means that it'll run somewhere on the site. So that might be on stuff. Somewhere on stuff we're going to drop your ads. And we're going to deliver the 100,000 impressions that you've bought over the next week. That means generally they'll use whatever else they can do to sell at a higher rate that will take priority, and you get what's left. So your ad will be the one that runs alongside the car crash stories and the plane crash stories and the abducted kids stories that no one else wants to buy against. You might get run of network. So a publisher like Fairfax, which has lots and lots of different sites, you might get across their entire portfolio. So run of network. Sometimes you'll sell things on more direct measures, so cost per click, cost per action. So that means you actually only pay when someone clicks on the ad, just like AdWords is, so search advertising. For that, the publisher will want to be pretty certain that they're going to get a certain click-through rate, because otherwise they're wasting lots of impressions. And then they might even do cost per action. So some insurance companies do this kind of thing. We'll only pay you when someone fills in a full insurance quote, but we'll give you $60 when that happens. And then it's up to the publisher and their ad server to optimize to get those people who are actually looking for insurance. So, if you've got a car classified site, probably a pretty good candidate for car insurance. So that might work for them. But then you've still got other stuff. The problem you have is you've got your sales force out there shaking hands and buying people lunches to a target of how much inventory you expect to have. So last week we had, 2.5 million impressions available. Next week we'll probably have 2.5 million impressions available. Oh shit, the Queen died. Suddenly everyone's hitting reload on your news site saying what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. And you've now got 5 million impressions. Well, what do you do? So you've got to do something with that excess inventory. You can run some free ads, like some house ads. Sign up to our print newspaper, it's awesome. It's not really going to make any money. So you might send that off to what's called an ad exchange. In the past, you would send it off to ad networks, which aggregated across lots of publishers. These days, you send it into the programmatic exchanges, which is what we're going to get to now. Starts off the same way. Your browser has an ad unit. It calls out to the publisher's ad server. Your browser connects to that. It makes an ad serving decision and decides, I've got nothing for you. Sends it off to the ad exchange, but it will set a floor price. It'll say, if you can't get at least this much, give it back to me and I'll run a house ad. The ad exchange's ad server then, your browser connects to it, it inserts a whole bunch of invisible iframes into the ad unit. So iframes are fully self-contained web pages that load inside a web page. And so this inserts lots and lots of those. And what's important there is your browser connects out to all of those iframes, which contain calls to other advertisers' ad servers, and says, hey, I'm here, and sends in the cookie that it's got for it. That's the really important part. So these ad buyers, that's called a demand-side platform, so it's a buying platform. They're seeing every single impression that comes in from millions of publishers across the world, and they see those come in and make a buying decision about whether or not they want to buy them. So in our example before, someone who's booked a test drive for a Hilux, Toyota's DSP pops up and goes, hey, I know this guy. I'm willing to bid $30 for this guy. Whereas a consumer goods manufacturer who's just trying to target New Zealanders might have only bid $5. So the ad exchange will, we'll give it to the guy who's bidding higher. Yeah.
And is this bidding process automated?
It is, yeah. So the DSP, the demand-side platform, is where the advertiser programs in their buying rules. And they might have inclusions and exclusions. They might be using external data sources. They might be tracking when someone's already been to their site so they know who they are or they know something about them. They've got a whole range of different ways that they're going to bid on that. They might say, I only want to bid on these sites, and they have a whitelist, or they say, I'll bid on anything except these sites, no porn, no torrent sites, or whatever. The ad exchanges also have rules, and the publishers have rules. So the publishers might say, no porn, no gambling, so that they reject those ads as well. They might also say, look, I've got a direct relationship with L'Oreal, so L'Oreal can't bid programmatically, because I want them to pay what we agreed over steak lunch, not what they can get by bidding. So there's lots and lots of complexity going on there. The ad buyers, DSPs, put in their bids to the ad exchange. The ad exchange makes a decision about who's going to win, generally the top bidder. Some of them do second price auction, which means if someone bids $20 and someone bids $5, the person who bid $20 wins but pays $5.01. But it's moving more to top first price auctions are becoming more common. So the ad exchange makes that decision. Again, it uses all those exclusions, no porn, no gambling, whatever it is that the publisher's requested, and then sends the winning bidder, the browser through to the winning bidder's ad server. The browser connects there, that goes out to a CDN, and you finally get an ad. So all of this stuff going on is the reason that your phone warms up when you go to a website that's got lots of ads on it, because every single one of these is running a whole raft of JavaScript on your browser as well, and it's making all these connections all over the place. It gets warm and the battery goes. Yeah. Good question. Sorry. Yeah.
If I'm an ad buyer, can I set different rules as well, like $10 for somebody, but just anyone?
Absolutely. So you might have a prospecting rule, which is just I want to hit everyone in New Zealand once.
Yeah.
And then you've got someone who clicked through, or maybe we hit them with the next thing. Someone who's filled in your lead form or looked at the product detail page, and you might your bids will gradually escalate up in price of how much you're willing to go. Yeah.
Cool.
And this process only happens when there's excess inventory involved?
Some publishers don't have a direct sales force at all, so they go straight out to programmatic. That's pretty common, and it's becoming more common because it's much more efficient. The people buying ads don't need to have all these meetings with all these people, and the sellers don't have to have all these meetings and buy all these stakes.
So is that where AI and stuff is coming in, where you optimize?
That's all up to, well, actually there's systems on both sides to do that kind of optimization, and AI is used for some of them. So there's some DSPs in particular where you'll set a conversion target, so you'll have a pixel that fires back to them sending a cookie saying the person has converted. So they might go out and buy inventory everywhere across the internet, lots of it, and then wait to see which ones convert, and then gradually optimize over to the ones that the publishers and the different sets of conditions that seem to predict sales or conversions of whatever the sort is. So there is that kind of stuff happening, yeah. And there's a huge amount of innovation in that space, yeah.
So, question. If I go to the Bunnings webpage, Bunnings is owned by Wesfarmers, which also owns AIG Estate Insurance.
Yeah.
So what are the odds that if I go to Bunnings, I'm not going to see an ad for an insurance company unless it's AIG or Estate?
Does Bunnings run advertising?
Yeah.
They do, yeah. No.
I don't know, I'm just
But
saying,
yeah.
so does this lend itself to anti-competitive, like you can blacklist porn and gambling sites? Can you also blacklist competitor sites?
Absolutely.
So if I go to Toyota, I won't see an ad for Ford.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I go to Bunnings, I won't see an ad for State.
It only works if you actually have ads on your website.
Yeah.
So like Ford and Bunnings and those kind of companies and AIG won't have ads on their website.
Right.
But if they own a publisher, absolutely. And you can be sure that Fairfax is blocking News and NZME from advertising. Hey, sign up to the New Zealand Herald on stuff. It's like you're not going to see that ad. You would hope. So definitely people do that. But you're right. There could most certainly be monopolistic stuff. Yeah. It's actually after a person who I've identified in some way. I'm after some characteristics. I want females 19 to 24-year-old, no matter where they are. They're on a skeezy torrent site or a porn site or reading about a car crash or something like that. It doesn't matter. But context, I think it still matters. So why do people use ad exchanges? Well, first of all, an undifferentiated impression is worth very little. So when I say undifferentiated, I mean, I don't know much about this dude. That's worth very little. So as an example, Stuff has an ad impression come in and it's someone who's in Uzbekistan. Now, I'm sure they have a sales force here in New Zealand. Doubt they've got a sales force in Uzbekistan. So that person's still consuming server resources, they're still going to read your webpage, you've still got an opportunity to make some money, but no sales force. Well, send it off to an exchange. Maybe the Toyota dealership in Uzbekistan is trying to target Uzbeks and will buy that ad, and they don't care that it's on Stuff, that it's not on a local publication. It's cool, they'll bid. You'll make something out of it, and you'll undoubtedly make something on every impression. It just be willing to bid pretty big when someone's definitively identified as someone who's in market for life insurance. So, there's a good reason for a publisher to write, some in-depth articles about why you might want life insurance and, how you should judge the purchasing of life insurance so that they can put you in a group that they can then sell for pretty high margins to life insurance. But the life insurers might come in and go, I'm not going to buy many ads, but I'll spend $100 CPM when I do buy them. But they've got to be, they've got to convert right. And if it works for the life insurer, if it actually backs out and they're measuring all the way through to conversion, well, they'll put more money in, they'll spend more. It also allows publishers to potentially get more for their money. So in my first example where we just had a publisher ad server, Toyota had already seen that person because they were lower down the funnel, but they got the buy that was just, let's push Toyota's awesome across all of the publisher. That actually means they've left some money on the table. They could have got some more money out of Toyota because Toyota was actually really keen to get back in front of that person. So potentially they can get more money. But also there's all the efficiencies. You don't have to have Salesforce. You've just got some people configuring stuff. In practice, the bigger publishers still have a Salesforce, but they're doing deals with big agencies and big advertisers that use programmatic to then deliver the inventory. So back in the dark ages, last year, people would still fax insertion orders through, or send them as email, Word docs attached to emails to say, I want to buy, these banners on your site. There's probably some dark ages publishers doing it, and agencies. These days, it's all done programmatically. So who's the players? You get lots of acronyms here. Demand side platform, that's the ad buyers system. The supply side platform is the publisher's side, so that's managing the different exchanges they're on and what rules they've got on that side. The ad exchanges sit in the middle, charge a very small slice, but at ridiculous volumes. We're talking 800,000 impressions per second kind of volumes. It's crazy transaction processing volumes. There's other third parties in this space broking data around people. So that can be kind of traditional players like Axiom and Experian and people like that. And there's new players as well. But what they do is they aggregate people's behavior across the web. If the person's identified at some point where they're able to track it, they might go and look at offline data about that person, stuff from other companies' databases, loyalty programs, that kind of thing, and they're able to pull together demographic and behavioural profiles of people. So if you've been reading lots of car reviews across lots of car review sites, you might have been placed in a car intender group, and maybe it's a car intender small cars, and then Toyota can go and say, okay, we'll target the Yaris and Corolla ads at people in the intenders small car category, and they'll pay the data broker for the privilege of better targeting. Yeah.
So where does Google come in here? Is it involved in all four of these processes, or?
Yeah. They own everything, of course, as usual. So they run an ad exchange called AdX. AdSense has basically morphed into an ad exchange as well. It's kind of an ad exchange. They run DFP, which is the publisher's ad server. They run DBM, which is a double-click bid manager. So double-click for publishers, double-click bid manager, which is the buyer's side ad server. So yeah, they take a slice of everything. They don't really do data broking, except for their own stuff, kinda. Yeah, but they make money on all sides.
Is there a lot of fraud in this space? Like,
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of faith involved, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a lot of fraud. So if you can, so there's a few places that fraud sneaks in. Up until very recently, you could say, hi, I'm the Guardian newspaper, and I've got an ad impression, and you had no way of necessarily checking that the impression was actually coming from there. That particular loophole's been closed, but there's still plenty of other loopholes. A lot of buyers, so what is disclosed by the ad exchange from the publisher is configurable by the publisher. So you can say, I'm not going to give you any details of what this impression is. It's just a black box. Would you like an impression? You're not going to make much money from that, but there are people out there who buy it because it's dirt cheap. So you said nothing. Then there's publishers that might say, I'll give you the domain name of where this impression came from, just that level. And then there's ones that'll give you the full URL. And it's up to the buyer to decide, is this worthwhile? Yeah.
When I'm bidding, if I'm bidding 30 cents for, my sort of funnel, top of the funnel, just want everyone to see my ad.
Yeah.
Versus I'm bidding $100 because I know that this person is this age in this space, looking at life insurance, whatever.
Yeah.
How do I check? How do I know?
It's very difficult. So there's fraudsters who run bogus publishers with robots pointing at them. There's actually legitimate publishers that run robots against their own inventory. So legitimate publishers. There are, and then there's people who have really sophisticated approaches where they work out what are the cookies that get me into the that I need to do? Like, what are the behaviours I need to do to get into the life insurance and tender segment so that someone will bid $100 for me? And then they have robots that go and do that sequence of events, and then go say, hey, give me an ad, and they've got all the right stuff. Yeah, yeah.
And it's impossible to distinguish whether it's done by a bot versus like an actual person?
Pretty much. There's simplistic ways of tracking bots, which is, you know, blacklists of data center IP addresses and stuff. But the bot guys have become increasingly sophisticated. They use botnets of virus-infected computers. So they come from ordinary consumer PCs. They move the mouse around, like they actually record genuine users' behavior and then play that back so that it's really hard to distinguish. It's really hard. It's an arms race. It's almost like doing business with people you don't trust. To put ads in front of people who don't want them is a difficult business model.
It seems like I'm amazed there's not call centres full of people in low-wage economies sitting around going through the correct sequence.
You don't think there are?
Presumably.
I'm pretty sure there are. There's a guy called Dr. Augustine Fu who's done a lot of research in this space. He's worth following. I've got some links at the end. Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit going on here. And of course, you know, let's step back a few steps. Do banner ads work?
Yeah.
Do they? Are we sure?
It depends where you are in the funnel stage.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. If there's no definitive proof they work, maybe we should start from that premise.
Google says it works because they obviously are selling it.
Yes, but they would, wouldn't they? So one of the tools that's involved here is a data management platform. Has anyone used DMP or Adobe Audience Manager or Lotomy? No? But it sounds really cool. Hey, I've got all this data, I can manage it. They're pretty simplistic, actually. They track behavior. If you've got an identifier, like the person logs in, you can upload that as well. Sorry, I just want to keep an eye on my time. You can upload that as well, and then you can upload offline data you've got about the user. So if you've got a CRM record of them, you can upload all of that. Then you can build all of their behavior and offline data that you know about them to combine that into segments. So you might say, someone who in our CRM is considered a gold class customer, who looks at these pages, maybe that predicts that they might leave you, they might be thinking about leaving you. So let's say you're a telco, you've got someone who's on a $100 a month plan, and they're looking at their plan details. Maybe, you know, they're trying to see that, and they're in the last 3 months of their contract. Maybe you might go, hey, these guys are in churn risk. So then you push a segment out to the ad tech ecosystem saying, hey, get onto another 24-month plan and we'll give you stuff. They also sell that data, will potentially sell that data with your permission to other DMP users. So what your browser says, hey, this user's John Smith. It does a cookie sync with some ad tech stuff, so with an ad exchange. Then you upload to the DMP a file saying, hey, here's all some stuff I know about people, including John Smith. And then when an ad impression happens, these segments, you know, this user is in segment 1 and segment 2, becomes available to target ads. I have to rip through the rest. This is actually about a year old, but this is a map of all of the display tech. There's a shitload of it. It's actually bigger now. From buy side over to sell side. And it's kind of crazy. If you look for Lumascape, you can go and have a look at this in more detail. It's kind of nuts how much shit's going on there. And you know, you've got agencies here. You've got verification and measurement tools because of all the fraud going on. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, there's some problems. Publishers used to have this model of what they called the waterfall, which would be they'd take your ad impression and they'd go, have I got anyone in my direct sales channel I can sell them? And they'd get that, but not that many impressions. No, I don't. I might send it out to an ad network or an ad exchange. That doesn't sell, I'll send it to a cheap exchange. That doesn't sell, I might put AdSense, and then I might fall back finally to a house ad. That's changed a bit. Now there's also these different models of auctions, including using programmatic means to deliver it, but the inventory is reserved and the price is fixed. Or the price is fixed, but the inventory is not reserved. So that might be the life insurance people. Hey, give me a first look at that every impression. When I find someone who I want, I'll give you $100. And then there's private auctions where you just want to open it up to a few players, and then there's just anyone can bid. And that's all changing too, because now we have what's called header bidding, which starts off the same way, but instead your browser actually connects to all of the ad exchanges and the publisher's ad server all at once. Now your phone's getting really warm. Because all of these ad exchanges insert all of the iframes, and your browser loads all of the JavaScript and compiles all of the JavaScript and calls out and talks to all of that, and it's getting hot now. Your browser then has to crunch all of that. The ad exchanges actually then respond with bids directly to your browser, and your browser's JavaScript decides who's going to win. Connects out to that and loads the ad. So that's even bigger. It's not very efficient though. So that's also changing. There's now some moves to have you only connect to one server, and then there's all these server-to-server connections to fan it out to all the other places. So your phone doesn't get quite so warm from all that shit that it's loading. And that's called server-side header bidding, if you want to look that up. Yeah. So a bunch of links. I'll put this up on. I'll tweet it to what is it, Measure New Zealand or whatever it is. There's a tool called Lightbeam which shows you all the cookies that are tracking you across different publishers. Really, really interesting one. Most of what I've learned about this, I've learned from Ben Kaneen, who's the AdOps insider. He's got an amazing blog. Really, really smart guy. Really nice guy as well. He's good at answering questions, stupid questions in my case. Ad Exchange is a place that has lots of news about all this stuff. And that guy I was talking about, who's a researcher at Dr. Fu, he's really worth following because he's always bringing up new bits of fraud that he's found. So I would say. Feel free to hit me up in the break if you've got questions. But I think we're about done. Cool. Thanks, guys. Facebook is a closed ecosystem, so you basically just have to trust them. None of this applies. But that also, I mean, they have a pretty huge amount of knowledge about but so if you've got a conversion like this is the thing, you don't really care about how this shit works. If you put X amount of money in and you get X Y amount of money out, and that ratio stays the same, everyone's happy. But it's when you're like, you sell toilet paper or deodorant or something like that where there's no conversion. How do you know?
Are you on your way?
No. I just think we need to get out of the room. Yeah, you're right. Yep.
What's the next one in the air? Do you guys know?
Measurement sales.
Trade me a call. But you've got to be aware there could be fraudsters who are claiming to be trading.
Solutions for things. So yeah, ours was really cool. She was like Harry Potter and Jurassic World website. But like this part.
If it's one of those account numbers, it says
And like the tactics for it.
if it's not, it goes wrong. And so that means that you know at least that the money is going
Like
to
in a
the
day-to-day.
trading.
Yeah, she literally uses post-it notes and gets all the people in the business to sit down in one room with a post-it note and says you've got 10 points each. I want you to write down what you think the objective is, put it on the wall, and then walk around and put your points where you think. Yeah. How cool is that? I'm gonna get some water. I'm thirsty. Do you want something?
Say, let's do it together. And you get that bottom feeder shy. They can't sell.
No, I've got everything on the.
You'll be at the very bottom of the queue.
Optimize sample size as only one.
But they're probably it's a low-end TSP. It's worth it. Basically the only one.
Acá atrás. ¿Tenés gente acá o no? ¿Te molesta que me sienta acá al lado?
Next time. We'll start manager next time. Okay. Bring your logos. Yeah. For the next time. How's your family? The little ones? Yeah, the little one didn't sleep last night. She had high temperature. Oh, really? Yeah, they're going to weaken until the end of the month. You say they? You? No, me. They. I'm going to Italy in August. Yeah.
How's lunch?
Penguin eggs with bacon. How often you need to go to your
Lovely, don't you?
contact
Okay.
How's everyone going? Starting to mention there. Cool. So, as you might all imagine, the presentation is on measurement fails, but also successes. I'm just going to be talking a little bit about my journey initially, where I was at as a digital marketer, hitting some real is when it comes to different business models, doing advertising, doing marketing, doing analytics for them, and what I've learned over the years and how to do it a bit differently now. So there is going to be a bit of exciting offline attribution, analytics work going on. Going to touch real briefly on a whole bunch of different things, talk about different techniques, but also like not overly talk on call tracking, even though I use lead for sale. It's not exactly the scope of the presentation. We're going to focus a little bit more on.
It also doesn't fail.
Oh yeah, and also it doesn't fail.
So often.
Let's not go into that right now. But it's a great piece of software, love it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the some old school methods and how they tie in with some of the modern digital techniques. A little bit about correlation analysis, how that can be used to basically build models and figure out exactly what's working online and how that's driving offline actions. So I'm gonna get into it. So you all know the old story. You've got this new account, doing some ad campaigns. Maybe it's a search campaign. Maybe you write life, greatest brands, women's designer shoes, next day delivery. The client's got this great e-commerce store, and you're really smashing out some great ads. But the question is it as easy as it first appears? I mean, they're selling $350 pairs of shoes online. They're designer labels. Everyone sure can go to the website, but will they necessarily buy online? Seeing some shaking of the heads. No, it's not always that easy, but in the client's mind, they've invested all this money into an e-commerce store, so why shouldn't it sell online? Why shouldn't the entire metric of success for this ad agency be to move shoes online? Everyone's shopping online these days, why can't we? And so really the formula of the sales team is go, yeah, build some great ads, spend some media money, sprinkle a bit of our magic pixie dust, and then everyone's going to profit. You're going to win, we're going to win, everyone goes home happy. But sometimes the conversations don't work out like that. And I had a client in particular who was a creative genius, right? He built this business from scratch, one of New Zealand's finest designer shoe brands. But also, like, he's a creative genius. He doesn't want to see spreadsheets of raw data. He doesn't care about impressions or clicks or even cost per click. He's more about the end result of the day, which is he wants sales, right? He wants to sell shoes. He wants his brand to be the biggest and the best. And he doesn't want to see a spreadsheet of numbers. He wants to see results, right? And so this is a actual conversation I had many years ago when I was starting out, where the client was very successful. We were running advertising campaigns online, but that success couldn't be tied back to any of our digital spend because the e-commerce store was not selling. People were going there really cheaply because this was back when search was just starting off. People were just jumping on that bandwagon. You pick up clicks for less than $1 for some pretty expensively to our face that our sales this month aren't being driven by you. Don't want to pay a bill for media spend unless they can see results. So how do you navigate around these conversations with clients where, you know, you need to be able to prove the value of what you're doing. You need to be able to prove effectiveness, not just to get the bills paid, but to optimize and manage the account, right? So real difficult conversations. You've all probably tackled this problem from different angles and come up with techniques of your own over the years. So real keen to chat about that in a bit. But what have I learned since then, and how do we win in this kind of scenario where most of their sales are offline? It's a high value product that people kind of want to take for a bit of a test drive before they actually buy, and aren't necessarily gonna, you know, buy online, but a lot of the research gets done online. How do we tie that all back in? So from my perspective, the work that needs to be done here can be broken up into two camps. We've got your storytelling. How do we effectively communicate with the client what's going on with the data? How do we present it? How do we visualize it? What is the story that's being told? And also, what's the actual work that's going on in the background, the data science? What are we actually measuring? How are we measuring? What techniques are we using? What kind of models are we building? How are we optimizing the campaigns? So, real interested in talking about a few different techniques that people have used. So we've got call tracking, which is great. Google's also got their own offline attribution options, and Facebook's got one as well to help tie together in-store sales with the digital media spend online. I'm not too sure if many of you have used the Google product before, but I've got a video here which, you know, they do a good job of simplifying and explaining down exactly how all the magic works. So I'd just like to show it for you. If I can. Whoa. Spoiler alert. Alright, I'm going to press enter. Nope. Play. Click. Sweet.
Today, shop online. However, 95%
This was the DJ machine before I hijacked it for the presentation. So
help marketers measure how their ads impact store. People today shop online. However, 95% of consumers often research at home or on mobile devices, but go to a store to complete their purchases. Google created AdWords store visit conversions to help marketers measure how their ads impact store visits. By measuring more, marketers can earn more customers, value mobile marketing more fully, and better optimize for consumer behavior. Store visit conversions measures the millions of Google users who have opted in to share their location history, clicked on an ad, and then visited a store. A custom algorithm extrapolates the data to account for non-signed-in users who exhibit the same behavior. The custom algorithm is tailored specifically to your account and campaign using a number of signals, such as location history opt-in rate, Google sign-in rate, and country. AdWords only reports store visits data if it reaches a strict, highly conservative confidence level. Imagine a sporting goods store with 100 retail locations, runs an ad promoting new camping gear, and receives 10,000 ad clicks. In this example, AdWords might owe 2,500 store visits generated over the last 30 days. This could mean 1,000 store visits were recorded from signed-in users, plus an additional 1,500 visits extrapolated to represent non-signed-in users. Like all Google solutions, consumer privacy is top of mind. Only aggregated, anonymized data is reported, and users can always opt out of sharing location history at any time. Marketers across many verticals use data to improve their mobile and physical experiences for customers. Speak to your account manager to get started.
This is a pretty new piece of kit. Has anyone actually used Google's solution for this yet? What do you think of it?
Yeah, I think they like it. Yeah, because the one we're using it for, the client we're using it for, had a really bad online site. So
Yes, it's pretty important, right? Yeah. And what about the Facebook side of things? Anyone got experience?
Isn't Google was Google do something similar with local shopping campaigns? Like a couple of years ago, started local shopping campaigns to target people in a specific location and drive visits to the store.
Yeah, like when you're walking past the store.
That's right.
Geo-targeting and whatnot. Yeah. It's a pretty good application of that, right? I think that over the years they're also getting more accurate with it. Like to start with, some algorithms were a bit hit and miss, but supposedly getting better. But yeah, in terms of like the Facebook side of things, has anyone used their solution for that yet? No. Jono? A little bit. Hit and miss. Yeah, he just doesn't want to say it's awesome, but it is a little bit awesome. Touchpads are crazy hard to use. Okay. Cool. So one of the other things that we can do, of course, is graph out everything that might make it real friendly, real pretty, real visual. So this here is just a real simple label graph of total e-commerce sales versus what they're doing brick and mortar ways. What is the store doing? Combine that together into a total sales view, and then of course overlay that with how many product detail views are we getting from AdWords campaigns. And in this case, it's just specifically, does someone view the product research online? Does it correlate back to success in the physical stores, right? And over time map that out. So you've got week 1, week 2, week 3. If we drive more people to view products online, do we see a trend there? Does it match up against the brick and mortar sales? Because even if we can't measure the e-commerce sales side of things, we've got this simple visualization to sort of show the clients, hey, we're getting more people into aware of the product and get them considering it. Part of the purchase journey really is to make sure that they just know that the product's out there, that it meets their needs, and they can go out and try it physically in store. So there's something we can do to take this a little further, right? So we can do a correlation analysis to give us some firm numbers on exactly how strong the relationship is between people, say, viewing the products online or people doing any touch point, right? Like if someone views more than one picture, does that change the likelihood of someone moving to a wish list, or if someone shares it online on social media via the social share buttons, does that correlate with people going in and trying the shoes on and buying in store? So statistical correlation basically looks at that variable, the online metrics that we're capturing in GA, and the offline sales that hopefully we're able to get from our client. And really, we're trying to find this value called R, just the coefficient of correlation. A lot of the data inside GA is going to be suitable for this up until a point. Like if you're spending millions of dollars, your data will really be linear, but the technique I'm going to run through talks about what we can do with data sets that are mostly linear. So essentially what I want to do this is, it tells it if the the relationship is positive or negative. If we spend more money sending people to visit these product pages, look at the e-commerce store, look at the products, shop around, does that actually cause more sales or not, or correlate with more sales, and what is the strength of that relationship? So, real basic steps to do your own correlation analysis. You'll need Excel for this, but you can choose the correlation option from the drop-down menu and just select the range of data that you want to get. So you pull in into the Excel spreadsheet the sales data that you got from the client. Ideally, get weekly data. If it's monthly, it's going to be a little bit harder for you because you're going to get several years worth of data. But as much as you can, really, and then map that against weekly metrics for page views or product views, or ideally custom events where users interact with key parts of the website, visit product detail pages, click on images, etc. The more quality metrics you use together, this is going to be really a whole 5 minutes to put the data together once you have it from the client. So essentially it just spits out something like this, and this is the R value that intersects between total sales and page view, and that's the correlation between the two. There's different ways to interpret this as well. If the R value, so this highlighted number here, is less than 0.1, there's no correlation, or it's a very weak correlation. If it's 0.3, it's weak. 0.5, it's moderate, and if it's better than 0.5, it's quite a strong correlation. So you can start putting some numbers behind the graphs that you'd otherwise be showing the client. And the idea really is to try and identify metrics or build custom metrics. E-commerce, advanced e-commerce is pretty good for this as well. So you've got an implementation that uses success you're really going to have with driving sales and correlating back.
Excuse me. So that correlation is actually how likely it is to be correlated rather than actual correlation.
So, gonna get to that in a second. So, the correlation here would be really just measuring the strength of the relationship between the two values, but it's not necessarily going to describe the total relationship in its entirety. Like, you're probably missing out huge chunks.
But the more you add, more likely it is.
Yeah, that's right. So, like, if you're using multiple metrics, then it starts to, you can start to get a better picture on how these metrics actually link back to sales, and that's kind of the next slide really that we want to talk about, the practical application, because this is really just tricks for kids. We can take this one step further and start building models out using it, and using it to influence how we, for example, weigh our goal values, and what is the idea here. So as a bonus step, we really want to be building a ridiculously good-looking model, like this gentleman here, to help win over our eccentric shoe salesman. So with this, we're really going to be looking at R squared, which is a statistic that will give us some information about the goodness of fit to a model. One metric itself isn't really that great, but if you're combining multiple metrics using this, you can get a better view of it. So we can get all this just from the R value on the previous slide. It's generated from the correlation analysis and Excel toolpack. And again, Excel free, essentially. You just plug it in and off you go. You don't really need anything super fancy for that. But you can use it to find out how much the rise in sales can be explained, for example, by a page view increase to your product views. And in this example earlier on, we had as a model just by itself one metric, right? If you start combining multiple metrics together, giving them weightings, as you would for any goal value, right? You can start figuring out how to better describe the offline goal. For example, sales. Want to sell as much, or even more ideally, if the offline goal is revenue, match into that instead. So really, you're wanting to use this just not just to communicate with the client about whether or not you've made sales or not, whether you're likely to have influenced sales offline. You can use it to identify new KPIs, set up new Google Analytics goals. You can use it to weigh those goals as well. So one of the things that I do when I'm weighing goals is I look at three things. I'm looking at, does it even correlate with sales or not? I look at what the ratio is of that metric to sales, if it's close or far from the sales point. For example, if you need 20 page views for every sale, that's one thing. But if you need 100 page views when they're actually deciding to buy, like the conversion rate's quite low, there's obviously huge drop-offs all over the show, so you can't really give that metric much weighting in the grand scheme of things, right? But if there's a pretty close connection, every 5 page views you get a sale, it's something to tell the client, right? If you're driving more page views within the existing experience, right, without trying to game anything too much, but if you're doing media spend that makes sense from a user experience point of view and gets more of this, then you're winning for sure. And you can really prune out some of the old metrics that you might have been communicating to the client that isn't necessarily helpful. Like I've seen a lot of people with these big, huge old reports, 10 pages plus. Most of the metrics in there don't even correlate back to any of the key business objectives. The client doesn't get paid bonus money on this. It's just noise, right? And we can really find out, does any of this tie back or not? Yes.
And it's also useful to influence not just the client, but also the online campaigns, because sometimes when they are saying, what's going on, we don't have any conversion, and can you give us some insights? We have this different behavior. We don't know which one is going to result in with sales. You can just flash races and say, this kind of audience, they have seen this kind of page views, average time in page or whatever.
A bunch of smaller different places. Like, it's really hard to get statistical significance on actually making optimization decisions, right? But if all of a sudden you've got really strong signals that you can optimize from without needing to spend $10,000, for example, and you can start to move much quicker on running these campaigns, getting them up to speed. And if your e-commerce store, for example, only sells 10 shoes a month, it's going to take a very long time to make any decisions whatsoever. But if a lot of them go to the site, spend lots of time, do quality things there that link back to actual sales, link back to actual revenue, then you can start tailoring the spend without even anyone doing anything online, really. You don't have to sell a shoe online to know that shoes are being sold in store. That's really part of the key point, right? You're building a custom model, multiple metrics, combining them together, giving them weighting, and then you can slice and dice that however you want. You can separate that down by different AdWords groups, for example, but you can also separate that by cities, browser types, age, metric in the back end of Google Analytics. With that, really, it's about identifying which metrics you need, plugging them together, using the new features in GA to set that up, and you've got this one number that really tells you and helps you quite handy. It's also, it does make quite a few assumptions though, because some of the techniques that we use there only really work with linear data sets. So if you've got a lot of media spend, like millions of dollars every year, some of your data starts to get a little bit where it doesn't really fit in the linear model. So you have to start looking at a few other techniques as well. But for most like smaller businesses, GA data is relatively linear because you can keep on spending more and seeing page views increase, spend more, see more customers come to the site, and there's quite a few million people who are potentially customers for various brands. So there's a huge amount of opportunity there to do some good correlation analysis. And I've knocked correlation in the past because it is by no means causation. You could try and game the system way too much to actually make this work, but if you first and foremost make a user experience that makes sense and then put the smarts behind it to optimize towards it, you're going to keep yourself a lot safer than if you purely just things that correlated. So yeah.
Yeah, what sort of aside page views, because that's obviously one that can get dodgier.
Yeah.
Start sending false stuff. What other ones are you using?
I don't know if I can actually say what I've used recently without giving too much away, but enhanced e-commerce metrics are good. I'd really talk with your GTM specialist about setting up custom metrics off the back of people interacting with your product online, researching it. The more they drill down into the site layer, like 5th, 6th, 7th level, quite deep in where they're interacting with the product itself, viewing the product in multiple ways. Maybe they're downloading, sharing, saving it to a list. Any of the core functionality that your e-commerce store offers really is a clue as to what people might be interested in doing offline off the back of that. So you pay close attention to the way buttons and forms and various things work. And I always think it just comes down to the product and where the customer is at with the research phase. Like if someone's trying to find out what this product is, and you've got a good way of tracking that online, then that's halfway to success, right? Just knowing that they're researching for a high-value product is pretty key. Whether or not the research is successful or not is another kind of interesting thing to measure as well. Yeah, so probably a tip there.
Are you using that with just GA or GA360, like the full suite?
You could just do that with GA. It's pretty simple to set up. And all the goal imports into your ad campaigns are all fairly straightforward as well.
So how does that work with view-through conversions? Because that's the biggest challenge we have with standard GAs. It doesn't take that into consideration.
Yeah, so I mean with this we're really more trying to measure how users interact with the site to predict, because we can pull so many different metrics out of that. Otherwise we're really limited to just a few search campaign metrics, and even there it gets real dicey. So yeah, good question, but
well, so have you actually ever thought about bringing in like an ad server, like a double click into that to actually look at the impressions as well? That
I've definitely had conversations about that. Love to do that. Have done that in the past using Seismic, but yeah, it's one way to go about it. I definitely do recommend it though, because it is
another data layer, right?
Yeah, for sure. Good stuff. Cool. So yeah, I guess to get feedback, how else do you think we could use this, or how else do you think we could tie in some online metrics to offline conversions? Like not even just using correlation, but there's a whole lot of techniques where we can start layering offline data up against the online stats that we have, and stats that we don't build out our GA profile to something that's more, I guess, more talkable with the client, right? Because at the end of the day, they're wanting to be told a great story about how well things are going. Yeah, pretty much done here, right? Like, unless you guys have any really hard mathy questions that I probably can't answer.
Hopefully not too hard. When you mentioned to group a set of metrics and give them weights, these weights, are there like arbitrary weights you decide? Or?
So, I mean, this is a real interesting question, because the goal weights that you use have a massive impact on your campaign. Ideally, you'd only be chasing revenue and sales in your ad campaigns, but that's not always practical. Like for example, when most of the offline conversion happens offline. So if you plug in other metrics instead and give them appropriate weightings, that can help. But knowing what those weightings are is the metric. So that's where knowing how well the model fits to offline sales works, and that's where the importance of R² would come, because it would give you the percentage fit that metric has to describe what offline sales could be. It's basically your predictive power, right? There's some caveats to that. It's really just an estimate, and it's just one of the toolkits that you should be using to figure out how to weigh a conversion, or how to weigh a metric. So yeah, I'd also look at ratio. I'd look at the actual monetary value off the back of that, right? Because not all shoes are built the same. You don't want to try and group everything into one aggregate bucket, right? You'd sell some product that's cheaper than other product. Some things don't convert as well when people arrive in stores. You want to get a view of what's their most profitable, what's their least profitable, and kind of break them down to categories. And then yeah, there is a bit of guesswork involved, but you can back it up with a whole lot of stats to make a good
and there's a word you can adjust the weighting.
Yeah, the idea really is over time the model would evolve as your understanding gets better, and you keep on iterating it out until you've got something that really drives sales the way that you want it. It's definitely a kind of a work in progress approach. Yeah. Cool. Great. Any questions? No? Alright, well, thanks for your time, guys.
That's cool, man. Sweet. That's not a field of for you.
I've already started doing chunks of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do they
It just might go quite quickly about halfway through the session.
I mean, it is an we're already starting doing some atomic prep. I mean, just a lot of the stuff behind the scenes I'm not really, getting into, but it's I saw you guys it's such a small room. Yeah. We can go experience and get some good science behind it. Good. Yeah,
couldn't quite see the screen, so you know,
I started my own shop. We met.
Yeah. It's grasping at that, holy grail. Yeah,
I mean, so that would be
funnel.
Okay, so you prove over that. So you potentially, because you can improve it.
That's just from a viewing. Pretty cheap and the thing is, like, concentrated techniques aren't that hard to do. It doesn't take much time. It's just like simplifying what should be measured, right? Because you can't do this on everything and go, oh, these things work, because that's kind of got machine learning trips stuff up, like accidentally finding the things that correlate. It's pretty cheap. There's a small chance of actually getting such. So you really need to look at the user experience and build this up. Solution, right? But you need to make sure you've got that tune planned out so you need to work on it so that you're not breaking the system. Breaking the key metrics that you need to try and do.
Sweet, man. No, it's cool.
Yeah, because I thought for a while that this year I was required means you have to be to that to fulfill it.
Yeah, me too.
And then one day the penny dropped.
Yeah. For me, it was a lot. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I think, I wonder if it's just to do with the fact that most people don't use
Any particular one that is the training?
people like, just everything learned by discovery and always
We have masters that he does mainly use it iPhone for machine.
Yeah,
yeah, so we use Python, SAS, SPSS.
Oh yeah.
SAS is now in sponsors actually.
Oh right. I just set.
So you're aware of this. Yeah. But now the program is also by sets. So now a lot of the code is assessment.
Are you guys in here sort of TV impact stuff? Yeah, great. Good, I'm in the right room.
But the problem is like no one knows the process, so it's been something like all in open source. But so now I'm trying to get now everyone knows these people. So you've got to pull data sets. So why now SAS is sponsoring like the master's degree and like my certifications.
I think we're ready to go, right? Yeah. Do you think anyone else is going to join? That should be ready. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I just share something that I wish I was doing right now, but I haven't been doing it very recently. It was probably about a year ago when I did this, and then before that it was probably about 2 years before that. So it's really looking at what impact television advertising has on people visiting your website. And yeah, it was quite an interesting analysis both times that I did this, and I wanted to sort of share with you ways that you can do this, and that I know of, and I'm sure there's plenty of other ways. But also, yeah, to talk a bit about what I found out from the process and some of the things that you need to think about as well. So just to start with, this is Google Analytics in inverted colours. That's the way I like to look at it. It's a lot easier on my eyes. I've got pretty bad eyesight, but this is the real-time report. And you can see, people coming into your website right now, second by second and by the minute. Now, if you're planning on doing some television advertising, if you know your ad is, going to go to the air, particularly during peak time, prime time sort of television viewing, on a very popular show. And you're expecting there to be a good response to your ad, I'd highly recommend going into the Google Analytics real-time report and waiting for that ad to come on the air and seeing what effect it has. That's a very basic thing you can do, and it's can be quite exciting, or it could be quite upsetting. But I think that's a good thing, right? Because then it's sort of it's telling you, well, how it's giving you some indication as to whether it's effective. Now, what you'll see, what I've noticed a lot of the times is, the traffic will be coming in like it is here. It sort of goes up and down. There's always this variation, but then something happens, right? It's your TV ad, and people react to that. They don't